Hello, welcome back here. The last times we have studied elasticity, which is about how responsive buyers and sellers are to pricing. Today, we are going to talk about chapter 6, which is government intervention. So in these chapters, we will focus on the when government intervenes in the market. The government intervenes usually in the market when the market is not working well. Okay, so we have assumed that market is perfectly competitive market. So usually these kinds of the perfectly competitive markets does not require the government intervention. But sometimes when things get in the way of the market order, so the government intervenes so the policy and makes the market work well. Okay. So, as you know that in the market, there are three groups. What was that? Consumers, right, which is the buyer, okay, and firms, which is the sellers. Another one is government, okay. So government usually impose the taxes and subsidies on the consumers and sellers, okay. So taxes and subsidies, okay, using the policy. Okay. The government grants taxes and subsidies to the consumers and suppliers in the society. So the government also corrects the distorted market order through the policies. So these government interventions could change the quantity and the price buyers should pay and sellers should receive. Okay, so this policy could affect price and quantity, okay, in the market. Okay, so let's look at how taxes and subsidies change the outcomes of the market. Okay, so how taxes and subsidies change outcomes of markets. Okay, so if the government taxes the sellers, they are obliged to pay taxes to the government, right? So a tax on sellers, right? So after imposing tax on the sellers, sellers what? Responsible for paying tax, okay, to government. Right? So if the government levies on the tax on the sellers, we can call it as what? Statutory burden. Okay? Okay? Statutory burden is this kind of burden of being assigned by the government to send a tax payment. Okay? Burden of being assigned by government, okay, and to send a tax payment. Okay, okay, that is a kind of statutory burden. Okay, so as we know that tax is kind of the cost, right? So for sellers, tax on the unit of a good is the kind of marginal cost, right? So as the marginal cost goes up, the supply curve is going to shift, right? Remember that it only moves along the supply curve as price is changing, right? So tax is kinds of tax is anyway it is kinds of marginal cost. Okay. So marginal cost if the marginal cost increases, so supply curve is going to shift. Okay. So take the soda market as an example. So let's say the market price is $1.1 and soda quantity is 1.4, right? So let's say that in this case, the government taxes 1.0, sorry, $1.3 per drink. Okay, let's draw the graph. Supply curve, which is the upward sloping, demand curve, downward slope. Okay, so here is the equilibrium point. So as we know that, we assume that the market price is $1.1 and market quantity is 1.4. Okay, so um, then the supply curve will shift to the left, right? After imposing the tax on the seller. So because the seller's marginal cost has increased. Okay, so the supply curve will shift to the left. So we have new supply curve. And here is the new equilibrium point with the taxes. Okay, so let's say that this new price is $1.3. Okay, and this price is $1. Okay, so $1.3 is what? It's from the demand curve, correct? So it is actually it is the price the consumer should pay. Okay, price buyers pay. Okay, what is the $1? $1 is price sellers receive. Okay, so as you know, that supply curve will shift to the left, right? And that's going to be moved by $1.3, which is the tax amount here. This gap is $0.3. Okay, so how do taxes get distributed to the consumers and suppliers? The total amount of tax is $0.3, so the sellers will get $1, right? And on the other hand, the amount of the consumers would have to pay for the soda would be the $1.3. So therefore, the whole gap is going to be $0.3. Okay, so this kinds of divisions of the tax burden is what we call a tax incidence. Okay. Okay, so how can you find tax incidence proportions for sellers? What? At first, at first the seller should pay $1.1, but now they should receive $1. How about buyers? Buyers should pay $1.1, which is the market price. Now they should pay $1.3. Okay, so let's look at this proportion. Okay, so that is the tax incidence. This proportion is 1/3. This proportion is 2/3. Okay, so out of the amount of tax, seller should pay 1/3, buyer should pay 2/3. Okay, that is amazing, right? Because a government usually pay the taxes on the sellers, but in the end, the tax incidence distributed to the sellers and buyers, both of them, right? Okay, so in the conclusions, it's amazing that when the taxes is imposed on the seller, both the seller and the consumer have to pay the tax. At this time, the burden is called an economic burden. Okay, so both sellers and buyers should bear burden of tax on sellers. Okay, in other words, they should share economic burden. Okay. Okay, so any questions about this? Okay, so what if we government tax consumers? Let's say that government changed the statutory burden to tax consumer, and then the price that consumers charge will increase by amount of tax. Okay, so government changes uh, statutory burden, and the government levies tax on buyers. So buyers should pay price price plus tax. Okay. So let's draw the graph using an example of a soda market. So here's a supply curve. Here is a demand curve. Okay. So here is the equilibrium point. So if the government imposes the tax on the buyers, this will be also increase the consumer's marginal cost, and the demand curve will shift to the left. Okay. Okay. Anyway, uh, market price is 1.1. Market quantity is 1.4. Okay. So after moving, so if the demand curve shifts to the left, okay, so we have new equilibrium point, okay, with the taxes. Okay. And we can realize that the market quantities is decreased here, and the price is here is, we can say that $1. And from demand curve, this this price is $1.3. Okay, $1.3 is price the consumer should pay, and 1.0 is the price that what seller should receive. Okay, um, so what you can see is that the economic burden of the taxes on the consumers is on the consumers and the suppliers. Okay, it is the same result with the tax on the sellers. To clarify, okay, for sellers, at first they should receive the $1.1, but now they should receive only $1. Okay, and how about buyers? At first they should pay $1.1, but now they should pay $1.3. Okay, so Seller's tax instance is 1/3, right? And buyer's tax instance is 2/3. Okay, so whether the new soda tax is on the consumers or sellers, these two have the same economic effect. Okay, both bear economic burden of a tax on buyers. Okay, so they share the economic burden. Okay? So in the end, you can realize that whether the new soda tax is gravity on buyer sellers. Okay, and sellers, it has the same economic effect. It has the same economic effects. Okay, okay, is it clear? Okay, so and then we will look at how the economic burden of taxes changes. Okay, depending on the whether the supply curve is elastic or inelastic. So if the supply curve is elastic, the curve slope will be um, relatively flat. And if it is elastic, the curve slope will be relatively steep. Okay, so just like this, elastic supply curve, literally flat. Okay, and in elastic, supply curve has the more steep slope. Okay, the tax instance depends on your ability to avoid taxes. Okay, so if the suppliers is elastic, the suppliers will be sensitive to price increases, right? Then if the government taxes the suppliers, suppliers are going to want to avoid them much. And the tax burdens is going to on the consumers a lot. Okay, tax instance, which is the proportion of a tax, um, depends on ability to avoid tax. Okay, so being sensitive to price changes will result in a smaller tax burden. Okay, so let's say in the first case, so if the supply is relatively elastic, the supply curve is relatively flat. Okay, so when the taxes are levied on the suppliers, the supply curve shoots by $0.3 to the left. Okay, this is the kinds of the example we have used. So case one, and the supply curve is relatively elastic. Okay, so let's draw the graph using our example. So here's the price, here's quantity of soda, and here's the demand curve. And supply curves would be like this. Okay, relatively flat. Okay, so after imposing tax on the sellers, supply curve will shift to the left. We have new supply curve. At the same time, we have new equilibrium point with the taxes. Okay, so here is the market price and market quantity. What was that? $1.1 and 1.4. Okay, so here is anyway the price that consumers should pay. Okay, so how much? $1.3. And from supply curve, this price would be $1. So which is the price the seller should receive. Okay, so this is the tax instance for consumers. As for buyers, and this amount here, this gap from $1.1 to the $1 is tax incidence for sellers. Okay, do you agree? Right? Then, when you compare the tax incidence of the consumers and the suppliers, consumers have more tax incidence. Okay, because this gap is bigger than this gap, right? So this is because suppliers were relatively sensitive to price increases. In the end, we can realize that buyers, okay, so when the supply is relatively elastic, buyers is relatively inelastic. Okay, inelastic. Okay. Buyers should bear a large share of tax incidence. On the other hand, for sellers, okay, we know that supply is a little elastic, so they should bear a small share of tax incidence. Okay, that is the conclusions. Okay, any questions about this? Okay, the second case is the when supply curve is relatively inelastic. The supply is a curve, then the supply curve will be relatively steep. Okay, so just like this. Okay, so if the government taxes the suppliers $0.3, using a same example, the supply curve will shift to the left, right? So here's the demand curve. Which is relatively flat. Okay, so here's equilibrium point. So supply curve will shift to left. Okay, here's a new supply curve, and here's a new equilibrium point with the taxes. Okay, so from here we have market price $1.1 and 1.4. Okay, and from equilibrium point, you can realize that we have the decreased quantity of the soda. Okay, and this price should be, okay, so this price would be price seller receive. Okay, and this price would be price buyers pay. Okay, so let's compare the amount of the tax incidence. Okay, so here is what? Consumers tax incidence. Okay. Tax incidence for buyers. Okay. Here is the tax incidence for sellers. Which one is bigger? Seller tax instance is bigger than tax instance for buyers, right? Okay, this is because consumers have changed their behavior sensitively to avoid the taxes, right? So sellers has more tax incidence, right? In the end, buyers share, bear a small burden of tax incidence. On the other hand, sellers bear a large burden of tax incidence. Okay, we can realize that more elastic, okay, leads to the small share of economic burden of economic burden. Okay. On the other hand, less elastic, which is the inelastic, okay, large leads to large share of economic burden. Okay, that is conclusion. Okay, so any questions about this? Okay, so now what if the government gave them the subsidies? Okay, so you could think about subsidies as a negative tax. Okay, so the definition of subsidy is the payments made by government to those who make a specific choice. So this kind of subsidy is negative tax. So it can increase the marginal benefit. Okay. Okay. So for example, if there are some low income people who want to go to college, right? So government usually impose the subsidies on these kinds of the people, okay, in order to help the college tuitions, right? Okay, so if the marginal benefit increases, okay, your curve, which is a supply curve and a demand curve, will shift to the right, because of increasing marginal benefits. Okay, so let's take a look at the examples, which is the effect of the subsidies. Okay, so if we draw the graph, price, and here's quantity. Okay, so if the government imposed the subsidies for child care cost, the demand curve will shift to the right? So in this case, here's supply curve, here's demand curve. Okay, so demand curve will shift to right. Here. Okay. U demand curve. Okay, so we have the equilibrium point with the subsidies, and we can realize that the quantity, market quantity increased. Okay, that is the effect of subsidies. So let's look at this price. This kind of price is price seller receive. Here is the price sellers received, right? And from this one, what? This point is from the demand curve. This price is price buyer to pay. Okay. So how can you conclude that? Buyers would pay less, right, due to the subsidies, and sellers would receive more, right? So that is the kind of effect of subsidies. The buyers would pay less, okay, and at the same time, sellers would receive more. Okay. Okay, let's use the two cases to look at how the economic burdens of the subsidies changes with elasticity. Okay, the first is when the demand is relatively elastic. At this point, the demand curve would be relatively flat. Okay, because of being elastic. So let's draw the graph. Supply curve, demand curve is relatively flat. Okay, that's the equilibrium point. When the government subsidizes, the demand curve shifts to the right and the quantity increases. Okay, so demand curve shifts to the right. We have new demand curve. Okay, and here's equilibrium point, the subsidies. Okay. If we compare the market price, market quantity, the quantities would increase, right? So, as we know that here is price sellers receive, right? Because this point is from the supply curve. How about this? This point is from the demand curve, right? So this point is price buyers pay. Okay, so if we compare the burden, which is the benefits, okay, the benefits from the subsidy. Here is the benefits sellers get, and here is the benefits buyers pay. Okay, which one is bigger? It looks sellers benefits greater than buyers benefit, right? So it means that buyers, in this case, elastic, okay, capture the less of the subsidy. On the other end, sellers are relatively inelastic, so capture more of subsidies. Okay, that is conclusions we have. So why? Why the demand curve? Why when the demand is relatively elastic? Why consumers get the less of the subsidies, right? This is because consumers' behaviors change sensitively according to a change in price. So they get the less benefits. Anyway, we can realize that the subsidy was paid to the consumer, but the benefit of the subsidies was assigned to both, which are consumers and sellers. Okay? Okay, next is when the demand is relatively inelastic. So at this point, demand curve will have a relatively steep slope. So when the government subsidizes, the demand curve shifts to the right, and the quantities would increase also, right? So here you can see the consumers receiving more subsidized, right? So let's draw the graph. Here is supply curve, and demand curve is a little inelastic. So more steep. Okay, so here's equilibrium point, right? So after imposing the subsidies, the demand curve will shift to the right. Okay, so here is the new equilibrium point with the subsidies. So quantities anyway increased, right? So here's the market price, and we realize that the quantity is increased, okay, because demand curve shifts to the right. And so let's compare the benefits of both. So anyway, here, what was that? Benefits, okay? This price is the sellers should receive, okay? So this one is benefits for sellers, okay? And this one is buyers, okay? So which one is bigger? In this case, buyers would get the more benefits of subsidies, right? So we can realize that sellers, in this case, relatively elastic. Okay, so in this case, they capture less subsidy. On the other hand, for buyers, relatively inelastic, so they can capture more of subsidy. Okay, that is the conclusions. Okay, so but anyway, um, the subsidy was paid, even though the subsidy was paid to the consumers, the subsidy benefits was allocated to the boss, right? But sellers benefits less as much, and this is because the behavior of suppliers changes sensitively as price changes, right? So in this case, the buyers will capture some more of the benefits. Okay. Okay. Any questions about this? Okay, so far, so we have looked at how the effect of taxes and subsidies changes with elastic. Okay, so we found that being elastic would change the behavior easily and would be less affected by taxes and subsidies, right? So next, let's look at the price regulations. So price policies for the government to restrict the maximum and minimum value of prices. Okay, so setting the maximum price is called price ceiling. So there is a limit to lowering the price, and setting the minimum price is called the price floor, and there is a limit to the raising the price beyond that. Okay, so price ceiling is the maximum price. Okay, on the other hand, price floor is a minimum price. Okay, so price ceiling is regulation pulls lower price. On the other hand, price floor is regulation, kinds of regulations, which is pulls higher price. Okay, so I will show you what it is. Okay, let's look at the let's draw the graph. Here's supply curve. Here's demand curve. Okay, here's the equilibrium point, right? So as you know that this point is the equilibrium point, okay, market equilibrium point where the price, market price, and the market quantity exist, right? So if the government impose the price ceiling in this case, they restrict the maximum price. So here's the price ceiling. Okay. So these kinds of regulations to restrict the lower price, right? And price floor is here. They restrict the minimum price. Okay. So for example, this one is the price floor. Is the minimum wage, right? So many owners should pay at least this kind of minimum wage. Okay, to restrict the wage at this level. Okay, the price ceiling is an example of the price ceiling is just to restrict the maximum price, right? So because in the New York cities, there's a lot of the higher price of the housing. So in order to restrict the higher price, the government imposed the price ceiling, right, of the higher housing price. Okay. So what happened if the government imposed the price ceiling? Many owners of the housings could not increase the price above this price ceiling, right? So that is the concept of price ceiling and price floor. Okay, so in the short, the setting the maximum price is called the price ceiling. Okay, and setting the minimum price is called the price floor. Okay, but these regulations prevent the market from going to equilibrium point. Okay, so usually prevent the market from going to equilibrium point. Okay, that is the price ceiling and price floor. Okay, so let's look at the housing rental market in New York. The New York housing price, as you know, is extremely expensive. Okay, so then it's very hard for the resident to find the right place. So government has a policy of limiting prices that should not be raised further. So that is a price ceiling. So that's for example, that's an example of housing rental market. So here's a supply curve and demand curve, right? And here's the price, which is a monthly rent fee, right? So market monthly rent fee is a $3,000. Oh, so expensive, right? So government would like to restrict the price, which is the price ceiling, at the $2,000. Okay, so at first the market quantity is 1,000, but after imposing the price ceiling, the quantity supplied is 950. The many sellers do not want to provide the housing at this price, but at the lower price, by lower demand, right? Many buyers would like to get the housing, right? So what happens? We have shortage, right? So here's the quantity supplied. Okay, here is the quantity demanded, right? So in this case, quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, so we have shortage. Okay, even though the lower price helps the residents save the money, they have less supply of the housing. Okay, so what happened? There is some unintended sequence because the seller's market powers is increased in this case. So there's an unintended sequence. Okay, first, owners are often less responsive to the request for repair. Owners are often less responsive to request for repair. Okay, because they have great market power. In addition, owners selected their tenants. Okay, the final one is there's a black market. Okay, so in the black market, they are selling and buying at a higher price. Okay, okay, black market is not official market. Okay, so for example, a Korean BTS group had a concert in the California last year. Okay, so the ticket price was about $70 at the time, but it sold out quickly, right? So since then, it has been the trade at $1,000 per ticket in the black market because there are a lot of the fans who wants to buy BTS concert tickets even at these kinds of higher price. So for them, going to the BTS performance was worth more than what $1,000. Okay, this is why even though it is a housing price, we have the bullion markets. Okay, so in bullion markets, they are selling and buying the stuff at a higher price. Okay, okay. Next one is we've studied what is the price floor. Price floor is to what limited the minimum price. So for example, there's a minimum wage and the price of alcohol. Okay, so um, okay, I will write down. There's a minimum wage and price of alcohol. Okay, okay. Let's take a look at the minimum wage. Okay, in terms of the alcohol price, government usually prevent alcohol from being sold at a lower price. Okay, because of the increasing the healthy status of people, right? And in terms of the minimum wage in Kansas is $7.25 an hour. Okay, so many shop owners should not pay the Kansas workers less than this amount of the minimum wage. Okay, this is because the government has a set minimum wage. Okay, I will give you an example of a minimum wage. Okay, let's draw the graph. Okay, here's the price. Anyway, in labor market, which is the wage, here's the quantity. Okay, anyway, quantity of workers. Okay, in the labor market, y-axis is the wage, and x-axis is the quantity of workers. Okay, so supply curve in here and demand curve in here. Okay, okay, remind that in the labor market, supply is in terms of the worker side, and demand is the employer side. So employers usually hire the number of the workers. Okay, so they demand the workers. Okay, so this is the labor market. So uh, at market price, market wages is $6. Okay, and in the market, they usually hire the 15 workers in the labor market. Okay, but the government set the minimum wage at the $10 in here. Okay, here's the price floor. Okay, so many owners should pay at least $10 as a wage. Okay, so in this case, the quantity demanded how much? Let's say 30, 13. and quantity supply is 17. Okay, here is the um, quantities of demand. Here's quantity supply. Okay, so after the imposing the minimum wage at $10, so what happens in this graph? Because of the high wages, the 17 people wants to work, but there are only certain jobs in the job market. Okay, so it means that the number of workers is less than the number of the jobs. Okay, so what happens? 4 people will be unemployed, right? So in this case, we have surplus. Okay. This kinds of surplus in the labor market means the number of unemployed. Okay. This is why every year this kinds of minimum wage issue is the very critical political issue. Okay, increasing or decreasing, right? But anyway, the amount of minimum wage is increased every year, right? Because of the increasing price index. Okay, so in order to improve the living standard, the government should increase the minimum wage. But for owners, it is not good news, right? Because wages kinds of their cost. Okay, so increasing the minimum wage leads to the less hire the workers, right? Okay, finally, it is the quantity regulations. The quantity regulation is limiting the minimum quantity and the maximum quantity, right? So there are two kinds of the quantity regulations, such as mandate and the quota. Okay? Mandate is to get you to buy or sell a minimum amount of the goods. For example, health insurance. Okay, so the mandate is require you to buy or sell a minimum amount of goods. Okay, for example, insurance, health insurance. Okay, this is a mandate. Okay, so we have to stipulate that you pay for a government-run health insurance, whether you like or not. Okay, so this is the mandate. Okay, so next one is quotas. Okay, so quotas is the policy that limited the maximum quantity of goods, setting a limit on maximum amount of goods. Okay, so for examples, when importing the movie from the abroad, there is a quota system. Okay, movie um, import. Okay, but this is to protect the films industry in the country. Okay, so another example is zoning law. The zoning laws is, but this is policy that limits the number of houses that can be built in the particular area. It is to ensure the natural environment and the right to view. Okay, so zoning law is limiting number of housing units that can be built. Okay, so after imposing zoning law, we have less housing and higher price. And higher price. Okay, so because of this zoning law, the number of the houses in the area is small, and they are traded at higher price. So if you graph the uh, zoning law policy, so here is a supply, here's a demand of housing. Okay, at first they can provide 700 housing, and at 400, which is the market price. But if the government imposing the zoning laws, the quotas would be this vertical line. Okay, so because they restrict quantity, which is a 300. Okay, so the zoning law have restricted the trade only 300 homes. The price that consumers went to pay is up to what? $600, and the price that the suppliers want to sell is over $200. Okay, so the price risk goes up to $6 due to the competitions among the consumers, and because the government have to put the quantity limit on the sellers. Okay, so $6 is buyers' willingness to pay. Consumers' willingness to pay up to, okay, $600, and this one is sellers' willingness to sell above $200. Sellers' willingness to pay, willingness to sell up to $200. Okay, so that is kinds of example of quota. Okay, any questions about this? Okay, so that's all the chapter 6. The next time we will study chapter 7. Okay, thank you.